The massive conference hall aboard the Galactic Unity Station stretched for what seemed like miles. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood near the observation window, watching stars drift by as she took another sip of her coffee. The bitter earth beverage had become something of a legend among the alien diplomats. Most found it disgusting. Sarah found it essential. The tension in the room could be cut with a knife. Representatives from 7 major galactic civilizations sat around the curved table, their various appendages, tentacles, and energy fields practically vibrating with hostility. The Zafrani delegation's crystalline forms pulsed an angry red. Across from them, the Mortiki warriors gripped their ceremonial weapons so tightly that the metal groaned. Sarah checked her watch. 3 hours into negotiations, and they were already threatening total war. She'd seen faster breakdowns, but not many. The mining rights to the Helix Nebula belong to the Zafrani Collective. Ambassador Crix slammed a crystalline fist onto the table, sending vibrations through the entire structure. We discovered it. We mapped it. The resources are ours by right. General Thok of the Mortiki Empire rose to his full 12-foot height, his 4 arms spreading wide. Discovery means nothing without the strength to hold it. The Mortiki fleet patrols those sectors. We have protected that region for cycles while you sat in your crystal cities doing nothing. Sarah took another sip of coffee and pulled out her tablet. She scrolled through her notes, occasionally glancing up as the shouting match escalated. The other delegations were choosing sides. The Etherian Council supported the Zafrani claim. The Vorthan Alliance backed the Mortiki. The smaller civilizations nervously shifted between the two growing factions. Perhaps, the Etherian representative whispered, though their telepathic voice echoed in everyone's minds, "It is time to settle this in the traditional way. Let the fleets decide." "Yes," General Thok roared. "Let strength determine truth. I call upon the ancient rights of territorial combat." Sarah noticed several delegates reaching for communication devices, likely alerting their military commands. In about 10 minutes, fleet mobilization orders would start going out. In 20 minutes, the first shots would probably be fired. By tomorrow, half the galaxy could be at war. She finished her coffee and set the cup down with a deliberate clink that somehow cut through the chaos. Every eye, optical sensor, and energy sensing organ turned toward her. "Sorry to interrupt," Sarah said, not looking sorry at all. She pulled out a small silver case from her jacket pocket. "Anyone mind if I smoke?" The room fell silent. The Zafrani ambassador's crystals flickered in confusion. "Smoke? What is smoke?" General Thok lowered his arms slightly. "Is this some kind of human weapon?" "Weapon?" Sarah laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to confuse the assembled aliens even more. No, it's just a cigarette. Old Earth habit. Helps me think." She pulled out a long, thin cylinder and a small device. "Though I understand if you'd prefer I didn't. Some species find the smell unpleasant." The Etherian representative's mental presence wavered with curiosity. "This is a ritual of your people?" "You could say that." Sarah flicked the lighter, and a small flame appeared. Several delegates flinched. Fire was still a primal fear for many species. She lit the cigarette and took a long drag, exhaling slowly. The smoke curled up toward the atmospheric recyclers. "My grandfather used to say that all the best deals were made over cigarettes and coffee." Of course, he was talking about trade negotiations in Singapore, not preventing galactic war, but the principle's the same. She walked around the table, cigarette in one hand, tablet in the other. The delegates watched her with a fascination usually reserved for dangerous predators or complex mathematical equations. "You know what's funny?" Sarah continued, stopping between the Zafrani and Mortiki delegations. "This whole thing reminds me of something that happened on Earth about 200 years ago. 2 countries, both absolutely certain they owned the same piece of ocean. Both had maps to prove it. Both had guns to back it up. Nearly started a war over it. What happened?" Ambassador Crix asked despite himself. Sarah smiled. "They decided to drill for oil together and split the profits. Made more money as partners than they ever would have fighting. But that's not the interesting part." She took another drag. "The interesting part is that 30 years later, they discovered there was no oil there at all. The whole conflict was over nothing. General Thok snorted. The Helix Nebula is rich with quantum crystals. Our scouts have confirmed this. Have they? Sarah pulled up something on her tablet. Because according to the Geological Survey from the Neutral Syrian Collective, those folks who do nothing but study rocks and get excited about mineral compositions, the Helix Nebula's quantum crystal deposits are, she paused for effect, contaminated. The room erupted again, but this time in confusion rather than anger. Contaminated? The Vorthan representative leaned forward. What do you mean? Sarah shrugged. Turns out there's a high concentration of dark matter residue in the crystal formations. Makes them unstable for most industrial applications. You could mine them, sure, but processing would be dangerous and expensive. The Syrians estimate you'd spend more extracting usable material than you'd earn selling it. She pulled up the report on the main display. Rows of data scrolled past, showing mineral compositions, extraction costs, and risk assessments. The numbers were not encouraging. This report is 3 cycles old, Ambassador Crix said slowly. Why were we not informed? Because, Sarah said, ashing her cigarette into a portable tray she'd brought. The Syrians published it in their quarterly mineralogical journal. Fascinating reading if you're into that sort of thing. Dry as dust if you're not. I only found it because I have an intern who actually reads those things. Kid wants to be a xenogeologist. Go figure. General Thok stared at the data. So we were prepared to go to war over worthless rocks, Sarah finished. Pretty much, though I wouldn't call them worthless exactly. The contaminated crystals have some interesting properties. Completely useless for energy applications, but the Syrians think they might have applications in theoretical physics research. Very niche market, though. The anger in the room was deflating like a punctured balloon. Delegates who had been ready to declare war were now looking slightly embarrassed. The Etherian representative's mental presence radiated confusion. But if the crystals are contaminated, they projected, then why did both your civilizations send scouts? Sarah took another drag. Good question. Let me ask you something. Did your scouts actually test the crystals, or did they just confirm they were there? Silence. That's what I thought. She smiled. See, quantum crystals look the same whether they're contaminated or not. You need specific equipment to detect dark matter residue. Equipment that military scouts rarely carry because, let's be honest, they're looking for threats and resources, not conducting detailed mineralogical surveys. Ambassador Crix's crystals had faded from angry red to an embarrassed pink. We mobilized half our fleet for this. The Mortiki Empire has spent considerable resources preparing for this conflict, General Thok added, his voice much quieter than before. Sarah stubbed out her cigarette. Well, here's a thought. You've already got your fleets mobilized. The Helix Nebula might be worthless for mining, but it's perfectly positioned as a refueling point between your territories. Instead of fighting over mining rights, why not establish a joint refueling station? Split the costs, split the benefits. Your merchant fleets would love the shorter routes. She pulled up another display, this one showing trade routes and travel times. The potential savings were significant. Plus, she continued, warming to her theme, a joint facility would require cooperation. Military cooperation. Shared protocols, combined patrols, integrated command structures. Do that for a few years, and your fleet stops seeing each other as enemies and starts seeing each other as colleagues. Makes it a lot harder to declare war on someone when your officers have been having drinks together at the station bar. The room fell silent again, but this time it was thoughtful rather than tense. Delegates were looking at the displays, running calculations, considering possibilities. This is why humans are dangerous, the Vorthan representative said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at them. Not because of your weapons or your fleets. Because you drink bitter poison for pleasure, inhale smoke for contemplation, and see solutions where others see only conflict. Sarah grinned. We're also pretty good at poker, but that's another story. General Thok looked at Ambassador Crix. For the first time in centuries, the two species representatives made eye contact without hostility. A joint facility, Crix said slowly, It would require extensive negotiations. Complex security arrangements, Thok added. Careful planning, Crix continued. Detailed agreements, Thok agreed. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then, simultaneously, they sat down. Sarah pulled out another cigarette. Well, gentlemen, sounds like you've got a lot to discuss. I recommend starting with coffee. I got a thermos around here somewhere. The war that had been minutes away from starting dissolved into the beginning of what historians would later call the Helix Accords. All because one human diplomat stayed calm and lit up. But Sarah wasn't thinking about history. She was thinking about lunch and whether the station cafeteria still had those synthetic sandwiches that almost tasted like pastrami. Preventing galactic war always made her hungry. 3 months after the Helix Nebula incident, Ambassador Sarah Chun found herself in another crisis. This time, the meeting was on Terminus Station, the massive trading hub where a dozen major space routes converged. The location was supposed to be neutral ground. The explosion that had destroyed half of the Korthax Empire's diplomatic vessel suggested otherwise. Sarah stood in the security center, watching footage of the blast on multiple screens. Around her, 24 officials from various civilizations shouted accusations. The Korthax delegation, their scales shifting through aggressive color patterns, demanded immediate retaliation against the Bellari Confederation. The Bellari, their mechanical bodies whirring with indignation, insisted they were being framed. The explosive signature matches Bellari antimatter technology perfectly. The Korthax security chief, a serpentine being named Histok, pointed at the data streams. They attempted to assassinate our entire diplomatic corps. Impossible. The Bellari representative, Unit Prime 7, responded with a burst of static that served as their species equivalent of a snort. We have been in negotiations with the Korthax for trade agreements. Why would we destroy our own interests? Sarah lit her 4th cigarette of the day. The other species had gotten used to her habit by now. Some even found the smoke calming, though she suspected that was more psychological than chemical. Has anyone checked the station's maintenance logs? She asked, blowing smoke toward the ceiling. The shouting stopped. 24 sets of eyes, photoreceptors, and sensory organs turned toward her. Maintenance logs? Histok's scales rippled with confusion. What do maintenance logs have to do with an assassination attempt? Sarah walked over to one of the terminals, cigarette dangling from her lips as she typed. Well, I'm looking at the blast pattern here, and it's interesting. See how the damage is concentrated on the lower hull sections? That's where most ships keep their waste processing systems. Your point. Unit Prime 7's optical sensors focused on her with laser precision. My point, Sarah said, pulling up a schematic, is that 3 days ago, Terminus Station's waste management AI flagged an anomaly in the chemical composition of the materials being processed from the Korthax vessel. High levels of trilithium compounds. That's unusual, isn't it? Histok's colors shifted to uncertainty. The crew has been taking mineral supplements. Our physician prescribed them for the radiation exposure from our last journey through the void sector. Trilithium supplements? Sarah raised an eyebrow. That's a lot of radiation exposure. Must have been a rough trip. The solar storms were particularly severe, Histok admitted. Sarah nodded and pulled up another display. And, according to the station's automated systems, the Bellari vessel in Docking Bay 7 has been venting excess plasma every 6 hours. That's normal for your ships, right, Unit Prime 7? Affirmative. Our fusion reactors require regular pressure releases when operating in station-keeping mode. Right. Sarah took a long drag from her cigarette. So we have trilithium compounds being processed through the Korthax waste systems and superheated plasma being vented near the Bellari docking bay. Station logs show that yesterday, there was a minor breach in the waste processing conduits between sections 6 and 7. Nothing major, just a small leak that the maintenance bots were scheduled to fix next week. She pulled up a chemical equation on the screen. Anyone here familiar with what happens when trilithium waste products come into contact with ionized plasma at temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees? The room went very quiet. A Syrian scientist who had been observing from the corner suddenly straightened. It creates an unstable antimatter reaction. The signature would be identical to Bellari antimatter technology, because the underlying physics are the same. Sarah smiled. Bingo. Not an assassination. Just a really unfortunate combination of alien biology, necessary ship maintenance, and deferred station repairs. But his stock scales had shifted to a confused purple. The timing. Our delegation was about to sign a critical treaty. Which is why you were all stressed out, Sarah interrupted. Stress affects Corthax physiology, doesn't it? Increases your metabolism, makes you process those mineral supplements faster. More waste products, more trilithium in the system. Am I right? The Corthax security chief's colors confirmed her guess. And you, Sarah turned to Unit Prime 7. Your species always increases plasma venting before important negotiations. It's like a nervous habit, your way of burning off excess energy. How do you know these things? Unit Prime 7 asked. Sarah shrugged. I read the xenobiology journals. Also, my assistant keeps notes on everyone's habits. You'd be amazed what you can learn just by paying attention. For instance, did you know that Etherians always dim their energy fields before lying? Or that Vorthans' ear fins twitch when they're excited about a deal? Several delegates unconsciously checked their own species tells. So, Sarah continued, stubbing out her cigarette, we have an accident caused by a perfect storm of biological processes, mechanical requirements, and bad timing. Not an assassination. Not an act of war. Just a really bad day that could have been prevented with a 20-credit repair job. The tension in the room deflated like a punctured spacesuit. His stock scales shifted through several colors before settling on an embarrassed orange. We nearly declared war over a plumbing problem. The galaxy's first sewage war, Sarah said dryly. That would have been one for the history books. Unit Prime 7's processors hummed. This is embarrassing. Embarrassing, maybe, but also educational. Sarah pulled out her cigarette case again. Look, everyone here jumped to the worst conclusion. Why? Because that's what we're trained to do. We see an explosion near a diplomatic vessel. We think attack. We see matching weapon signatures. We think enemy action. But sometimes the universe is just messy. She lit another cigarette, ignoring the fact that she told herself she was cutting back. On Earth, we have a saying. When you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. It means the simplest explanation is usually correct. But out here, dealing with dozens of different species, different technologies, different biologies, we forget that simple explanations exist. What do you suggest? Histok asked, his professional pride clearly stinging. Join investigation teams, Sarah said immediately. Every major incident gets investigated by a mixed group. Different species, different perspectives. Harder to jump to conclusions when you've got a Bellari engineer pointing out that the blast pattern is all wrong for a deliberate attack, or a Corthax biologist explaining why trilithium supplements are necessary for their species. She brought up another display, this one showing incident reports from the past year. Look at this. 40% of near conflicts in the past cycle have been based on misunderstandings. Technical failures interpreted as attacks. Biological processes mistaken for weapons deployment. Cultural practices seen as threats. We're so different from each other that we see danger where there's just difference. The Etherian observer, who had been silent until now, suddenly brightened. The human suggests wisdom. In our fear of others, we create the very conflicts we seek to avoid. Poetry aside, Sarah said, yeah, that's pretty much it. We need better communication protocols. Shared databases on species-specific biological and technological quirks. Regular updates on ship maintenance schedules. Boring stuff, but it'll prevent more wars than any treaty. General Thok from the Mortiki Empire entered the security center, his heavy footsteps making the floor vibrate. I heard there was nearly another war. The humans stopped it again. With cigarettes and common sense, Histok muttered. Thok laughed, a booming sound that made several delegates flinch. The Mortiki have a saying, the greatest warriors win without fighting. I'm beginning to think humans understand this better than we do. Sarah waved off the compliment. We just have more experience with stupid conflicts. Earth history is full of wars that started over misunderstandings. We learned the hard way that talking is cheaper than shooting. Speaking of talking, Unit Prime 7 interjected the Corthax-Bellari trade agreement. Given that neither of us actually tried to kill the other, perhaps we could return to negotiations? His stock scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. Perhaps, though I think we should include provisions for better waste management protocols. Agreed, Unit Prime 7 replied. And perhaps a joint fund for station maintenance. This incident has highlighted the dangers of deferred repairs. Sarah smiled as the two delegations began discussing details. Another crisis averted, another war prevented. She made a mental note to recommend that Terminus Station hire a few human maintenance supervisors. Sometimes the best defense against interstellar conflict was a properly maintained sewage system. Her communicator buzzed. Another urgent message, another crisis somewhere in the galaxy. She checked the location and sighed. The hegemony was rattling sabers at the Alliance again, this time over trading rights in the spiral sector. Ma'am, her assistant, a young human named David who had joined her staff 6 months ago, appeared at her elbow. The shuttle to the hegemony capital leaves in an hour. Pack extra cigarettes, Sarah told him, and maybe some of that Turkish coffee from Earth. I have a feeling this is going to be a long one. As she left the security center, she heard his talk explaining human coffee customs to Unit Prime 7. Apparently, the bitter beverage was becoming popular as a negotiation tool. Sarah smiled. If humanity's greatest contribution to galactic peace was caffeine and nicotine, she could live with that. The shuttle ride to the hegemony capital gave her time to review the situation. Trading rights were always contentious, but this felt different. The hegemony had been increasingly aggressive lately, pushing boundaries, testing responses. They were old-school imperialists who believed in might-makes-right diplomacy. Sarah lit another cigarette and watched the stars streak by outside the shuttle window. The hegemony respected strength, but they were also pragmatists. There would be an angle, a way to redirect their aggression into something productive. There always was. She just had to stay calm and find it. The hegemony's throne room was designed to intimidate. Towering columns of black metal stretched up into darkness. The walls displayed holographic trophies from 1,000 conquered worlds. At the far end, Supreme Overlord Cranox sat on a throne made from the melted-down hulls of defeated enemy ships. Sarachin walked through the massive doors, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. She'd changed into her formal diplomatic attire for this meeting, but she'd kept her cigarette case in her pocket. Some habits were too useful to abandon for protocol. Ambassador Chun. Cranox's voice rumbled like distant thunder. The hegemony leader was 15 feet tall, covered in battle scars, with 4 arms that could crush steel. You come alone, brave or foolish? Practical, Sarah replied, stopping at the prescribed distance from the throne. Bringing guards would imply, I think you'd break diplomatic protocols. That would be insulting to both of us. Cranox laughed, a sound like grinding gears. The human understands respect. Good. Then, you also understand that the Alliance must surrender the spiral sector trade routes to the hegemony. We have been patient long enough. I understand that's your position, Sarah said carefully. I also understand the Alliance has held those routes for 300 cycles and has no intention of giving them up. Then, there will be war. Cranox leaned forward. The hegemony fleet is the strongest in the galaxy. The Alliance knows this. Sarah pulled out her cigarette case. Mind if I smoke? The sudden change in topic made Cranox blink all 6 of his eyes. You wish to engage in your narcotic ritual while I threaten galactic war? It helps me think, Sarah said, lighting up. And, frankly, Supreme Overlord, you're not threatening war. You're negotiating. If you really wanted war, we wouldn't be talking. I dare to point out the obvious, Sarah interrupted, taking a drag. The hegemony has the strongest fleet, yes, but it's currently spread across 17 systems maintaining order in your existing territories. The rebellion on Proxima 7 is requiring 3 battle groups alone. The pirate activity near the rim has another 2 battle groups tied up. Your actual available forces for a new conflict are limited. Cranox's primary arms gripped his throne. You have been spying on the hegemony? Reading public shipping reports, Sarah corrected. Pirate attacks on merchant vessels have to be reported for insurance purposes. Military deployments affect trade route scheduling. It's all there if you know how to read between the lines. She walked closer, still smoking. But here's the interesting part. The Alliance doesn't want war either. They're dealing with an economic recession. Their merchant guilds are pressuring the government to reduce military spending. A war would be inconvenient for everyone. Then, they should surrender the routes, Cranox growled. Or, Sarah said, we could talk about what you really want. The throne room fell silent except for the hum of the holographic displays. The spiral sector routes aren't that profitable, Sarah continued. Oh, they're okay, but the real money is in the core world's trade network. The hegemony has wanted access to those markets for decades, but the core world's consortium keeps you locked out. They're snobs who think the hegemony is too militaristic for civilized commerce. Cranox's expression shifted slightly. Continue. The Alliance has excellent relations with the consortium. They could sponsor the hegemony for provisional membership, get you a foot in the door. Much more valuable than the spiral routes. The Alliance would never agree to this, Cranox said, but his tone was less certain. Sarah smiled. They would if the hegemony offered something in return. Say, joint anti-piracy patrols in the Rim? Your forces are already there. The Alliance merchants would love the extra protection. It would free up Alliance military resources for other uses. She pulled up her tablet, showing projected trade revenues. Hegemony access to core world markets would increase your GDP by approximately 15% within 5 cycles. The spiral routes? Maybe 2%, and that's being optimistic. Cranox studied the numbers. Why would the human help the hegemony? Because, Sarah said, stubbing out her cigarette, a prosperous hegemony focused on trade is less likely to start wars. A hegemony working with the Alliance on anti-piracy operations builds trust between your militaries. Trust reduces the chance of conflict. Everyone wins. The hegemony does not need trust, Cranox rumbled. We have strength. Really? Sarah lit another cigarette. Then, why are you talking to me instead of attacking? The question hung in the air. Cranox's 6 eyes narrowed. Sarah pressed on. Strength isn't just about weapons, Supreme Overlord. Economic strength matters. Political strength matters. The ability to achieve your goals without firing a shot? That's the ultimate strength. She gestured at the trophy-covered walls. Every one of these victories cost you ships, soldiers, resources. What if you could get what you want without those costs? The hegemony way is conquest, Cranox insisted, but he sounded less convinced. Was conquest, Sarah corrected. Times change. The galaxy is more connected now. War is bad for business, and business is what keeps civilizations running. Even the hegemony needs trade to maintain its fleets. She brought up another display. I've drafted a preliminary proposal. The hegemony commits to joint anti-piracy operations for 10 cycles. In exchange, the Alliance sponsors your consortium membership and provides diplomatic support. Both sides save face, both sides profit. Cranox was quiet for a long moment. The War Council will resist. Many believe conflict is inevitable. Then, give them a different kind of conflict, Sarah suggested. Pirates are everyone's enemy. Let your warriors win glory fighting them instead of the Alliance. Same battle honors, better profit margins. The Supreme Overlord stood, his massive form casting shadows across the throne room. You humans are strange creatures. You poison yourselves with smoke, drink bitter stimulants, and see opportunities where others see only obstacles. We're complicated, Sarah agreed, but we're also practical. This deal makes practical sense for everyone. Cranox descended from his throne, each step shaking the floor. He stopped just outside Sarah's personal space, looming over her. If this fails, if the Alliance betrays the hegemony, there will be war. If this succeeds, Sarah countered, not backing down, there won't need to be. For a long moment, Predator and Diplomat stared at each other. Then, Cranox laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. Very well, human. I will present your proposal to the War Council. But I have conditions. I expected nothing less, Sarah said. The negotiations took 6 hours. Cranox was a skilled negotiator when he wasn't threatening to conquer everything. They haggled over patrol schedules, profit sharing, command structures. Sarah smoked her way through half a pack of cigarettes and most of her thermos of coffee. By the end, they had an agreement that would transform the hegemony from a militaristic threat into a security partner. The alliance would get protection for their merchants. The core worlds would get access to hegemony goods and resources. Everyone would make money. This is not how I expected this day to end, Cranox admitted as they finalized the documents. The best days rarely end how we expect, Sarah replied, lighting one last cigarette. That's what makes diplomacy interesting. As she prepared to leave, Cranox called out, Ambassador Chun, the human called Churchill. He also smoked during negotiations, yes? Sarah turned, surprised. You've studied Earth history? Know your enemies, Cranox quoted. Though perhaps that saying needs updating. Know your trading partners lacks the same dramatic impact. Sarah laughed. It really does. But it's probably more accurate for the modern galaxy. A month later, Sarah stood on the bridge of a hegemony battlecruiser as it destroyed a pirate base that had been plaguing Alliance merchants for years. General Thok of the Mortiki was there, along with representatives from a dozen civilizations. The joint operation was a massive success. The humans have changed us, Thok observed, watching the pirates flee. We gather for protection instead of conquest. Change isn't always bad, Sarah replied, sipping her coffee. No, Thok agreed. Though I notice you still haven't changed your beverage preferences. That coffee smells terrible. Some things, Sarah said with a smile, are worth keeping exactly as they are. Her communicator buzzed. Another crisis, another potential war to prevent. The collective was having a succession dispute that was threatening to spill over into neighboring systems. She checked her cigarette supply. Still half a carton left. Plenty for a succession crisis. Mom. David appeared with her travel bag. The shuttle is ready. Sarah finished her coffee and straightened her jacket. Tell them we'll need to stop at a station along the way. I need to pick up more coffee. The good stuff from Earth. As she headed for the shuttle, she reflected on humanity's unusual role in galactic politics. They weren't the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most technologically advanced. But they understood something many others missed. That the real power wasn't in weapons or threats, but in finding the solution that let everyone walk away feeling like they'd won. That, and a steady supply of cigarettes and coffee. The galaxy was vast, full of different species with different needs, different fears, different dreams. Conflict was inevitable when so many differences collided. But conflict didn't have to mean war. Sometimes it just meant sitting down, lighting up a cigarette, and asking the simple question, what do you really want? More often than not, what they really wanted wasn't worth dying for. It was just worth talking about. And Sarah Chun, ambassador from Earth, was very good at getting people to talk. The shuttle lifted off, heading for the next crisis. Sarah lit a cigarette and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, someone was preparing for war. Her job was to help them find a better way. It wasn't glamorous work. It wouldn't make the history books like the great battles of the past. But it kept the peace, kept trade flowing, kept civilizations growing and learning from each other. And really, that was worth more than all the conquered worlds in the galaxy.